started. My name's Greg Shankin from Boulder, Colorado, and doing this webinar with Jason Burge from PATA. And we're super excited for this. This is a great opportunity for two of the pioneering states in this space, Oregon and Colorado. And we love Oregon, and I think Oregon loves Colorado. So lots of friendships and collaborations and just sharing and learning from each other. Oregon was the first, so I always go like this. And guess what? Oregon's making mistakes, and I go like this. And Colorado is making mistakes, and mistakes are good. That's how we learn. And the third state, whoever that is, we had hoped we'd had that, but that didn't happen. But there will be a third state at some point, and that state will learn from us. So much love between the states, and it's great to see people from other states joining and other countries. So far, we've seen England and Canada, as far as I've seen. So we have a great panel tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so Jason can just share a couple of words about PATA. I'll share a couple of words about Colorado Psychedelic Society, but really we want to spend time getting right into the panel here tonight, where you'll be able to meet some amazing facilitators from Oregon and learning from them, asking questions to them, and really getting a lot of great information. So with that, I'll share my screen, and this is our topic tonight. So thanks again for joining. And Jason, why don't you share a bit about what you do and PATA? And
Absolutely, and welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. And early thank you to all of our panelists that are part of our training today for taking your time, and for all of your dedication, as Greg said, to helping us get off the ground and really be the pioneers in this. So my name is Jason Burge, and I am the co-founder and the chief business officer with the Psilocybin Assisted Therapy Association. We're a national nonprofit whose mission is to promote the educated and informed use of psilocybin-assisted therapy to address the mental health crisis. We're primarily an education-based organization, and we're going to be doing a lot of additional trainings coming up, including one on the 12th, where we're having Sean McAllister from McAllister Law, who's going to be doing a pros and cons of Oregon's program and Colorado's programs, kind of a comparison. So if you'd like to learn a little bit about the two programs side to side, please check that out. And the Psilocybin Facilitators Association is a program of PATA designed to support our facilitators in advocacy. It'll be a developing 501c6, but really to be a resource for licensed facilitators to be able to learn from each other and really be advocating for change forward. So if you become a facilitator, we'd love for you to learn more about it, and we will be having a program, a membership program designed specifically around that. And really a great honor to be doing this with Greg, with Colorado Psychedelic Society. Collaboration is huge, and partnerships are really huge with us. So thank you, Greg, for allowing us to partner with you on this training.
yeah, likewise. It's been a pleasure working with you, and it's our first collaboration with PATA, and I just want to give a shout out to Jason because he's been awesome to work with. And when you collaborate with new people in the organizations, obviously you go in with optimism, and you hope that optimism is realized. In this case, it has been. Jason's just been great to work with, responsive, just in the spirit of collaboration and having our two states work together and our organizations work together. So thank you, Jason. And so just a quick intro on myself. So first of all, you hopefully all see I'm wearing an Eagles hat, and plant medicine and football sometimes goes together, sometimes it doesn't. In my case, it does. I'm a Philadelphia native, and I'm wearing this hat right now, but I'll switch to the hat that I usually wear. By the way, psychedelic healing does not help with follicle impairment. I've learned that the hard way. And I'll switch to my regular hat, which says empathic on it. And so I'll just say, whoever loses the game, I'll be full of empathy for those fans. So I'm Greg Shankin. I'm from Boulder. And I have a passion for serving this space however I can through advocacy, nonprofit work, and for-profit work. So I was an ambassador for Prop 122, and it was a great honor to be a part of that effort. And now we're seeing it come to realization. We will have healing centers opening in Colorado this year. So we call them healing centers. Oregon calls them service centers, but they'll be doing amazing healing work regardless of the name. And the co-founder of the Colorado Psychedelic Society, the founder, Aaron Witter, is on this call. So he founded it right after Prop 122 passed. So much respect for him for doing that. And we are starting to host more events. The big thing that we need, of course, we need funding, but we need volunteers. So we've had some great people step up and starting to help us grow. So you can see the QR code there. And on the for-profit side of my work, I own an agency, web development and digital marketing, solely focused on the healing and psychedelic space. So you can reach out to me there. The QR code, hook up with me on LinkedIn. But basically the CPS, Colorado Psychedelic Society. So we are providing awareness, education, community, friendships, events like this, in-person events, virtual events. So when you join us, you'll learn about those events. So that is what I have to say about us and CPS. And what we will do now is, Jason, please share some of the opening comments in terms of the rules and etiquette, and then we'll get into the panel.
Thank you, Greg. And to help protect our nonprofit status, and all of us really appreciate if we could have no discussions around sourcing of materials. If something comes up within, the state regulated programs, of course, that would be allowed, but please no discussions around sourcing. All the questions, Greg and I will be monitoring this, and moderating this, and all the questions, we will be presenting questions. We have a few questions that we'll be doing in the beginning. If you have a question that you would like to ask, please enter it into the chat. We would like everyone to stay on mute so that this way the focus can remain on our incredible panelists that are present. So feel free to enter in your question on the side, and we will be gathering them, and then Greg or I will present them to the panelists as it goes along. Please be respectful to each other. These topics, these are the views of an incredible group of panelists. We really tried to get panelists with different backgrounds, different licensures, different experiences to be sharing their views. They're not here to paint rosy pictures or try to sell anything in particular. They're here to share their truth. So let's respect what they have. If you do have a difference in opinion, just be mindful about how that is being shared. We would like to not have conversations be continuing on in the side chat. Please keep those just for the questions. If you do have a question that you'd like to present to an individual, feel free to just send an individual chat to that person or to exchange emails. And with that, pass back to Greg to introduce our incredible panels. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're just going to have each panelist introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get into the questions. So first up, we have Matt Whistler. Thanks for joining, Matt.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here, Greg and Jason. My name's Matt Whistler, and I've been facilitating full-time here in Oregon since hosting what we believe was the second session held under Measure 109. Along with that, I'm an instructor with the Changa Institute certification program, so currently helping with 2 cohorts going through the process, including the first group that'll be eligible for certification and licensure in Colorado. My background in brief is I started off as a wildlife biologist, did that for about 12 years, went to teaching, so I was an educator for a little while, moved on from that to running work readiness programs for at-risk young adults, and then crisis intervention for very young people. So I've had a lot of training and experience in trauma-informed care and crisis intervention, it's in the name. And aside from that, I've also somewhat recently, acquired an end-of-life doula certification, which is really helpful with aspects of my practice.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Next up, we have Henry Fields. Welcome, Henry, and thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, and hello, everyone. My name is Henry Fields, and I'm a licensed facilitator in Portland. I've been a lifelong experiencer of psychedelics, started pretty young in high school, and I've also always been interested in spirituality, yoga, meditation, mystery systems, things like that. And I started maybe a year before the 109 passed here in Oregon at a psilocybin church that had federal protection. And I worked as a facilitator there. And then when 109 passed, I trained with Intertrek and have been working out of that center since the beginning and a few others. I also helped to lead their trainings over there and have a 501c3 to raise funds to work with carceral and criminal justice impacted people. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. Okay, next we have.
I have to hop off at 6 o'clock. I just wanted to let the group know that, but thanks in advance.
Yes, we'll definitely get you some questions first, so you can do that. And so happy you were able to join. Okay, Nitai Alex, welcome. Good to see you again.
Hey, it's just so awesome to see so many faces. I love the interest, and thank you so much for Jason and Greg for doing this. This really is the Mycelium Network in action. So my name is Nitai. I am a facilitator in Eugene, Oregon. And I always say I did not find the mushrooms found me, and I've been in service to them ever since. So I come from a trauma-informed background in crisis counseling, working with survivors of sexual assault and adult survivors of child abuse. I also have worked at outpatient addiction centers, but when my journey started with this, it was the most unexpected but natural emergence of my life purpose and my life path. Interestingly enough, I started with retreats, and it was like full in, straight off the bat. So I've been trained. I moved to Oregon just in time to get cleared, and I currently do 5-day retreats, both for individuals and groups. And I work out of a variety of service centers and with companies all over Oregon. So thank you.
Thanks, Nitai. Okay, next we have Christine Marie. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I am a licensed facilitator in Portland, Oregon. However, I do also work around the state. My background is in Western medicine as a registered nurse. I practiced that for about 6 years, and then alignment took me elsewhere to really open up my own private practice as an energy healer. My background and my training is in Reiki, Celtic shamanism, sound healing, and altered states of consciousness, both with and without plant medicines. And I also have been holding space for others more in a ceremonial context for many years. And so it's been just a deep honor and privilege to be in the state regulated system, to be more accessible to those that would rather do it in the licensed way. And yeah, I'm grateful to be here and looking forward to connecting with you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine Marie. And next we have Michael Howdy. Good to see you, Michael.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Jason. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Huddy. I'm probably the senior citizen in the panel here. I don't know how old Henry is. Most of us know each other. I began 40 some years ago in Oregon as a surgical resident at OHSU. I've practiced surgery for 20 some years and then moved into emergency medicine, but also tried to do as much as I could outside the office and hospital, and did medical missions in Africa and worked as a ship doctor and had an acupuncture practice and things like that. But I began my psychonaut journey as a teenager and kind of had to put it to rest for a while to start my career. But I was really happy when Measure 109 passed, and I was able to kind of close out my career in medicine doing what I do, which is facilitating. I don't know whether I'm part-time or full-time, Matt. I like to do about 2 or 3 sessions a month, and that's plenty full-time for me. I'm involved in some teaching. I try to do whatever policy work I can, and I have a cottage industry medical consulting business helping clients and facilitators with some medication questions and strategies about weaning their medications.
Great. Thanks, Michael. And last we have Jessica Wright. Hi, Jessica.
Hey everyone, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm Jessica Reich, and I've been an OHA licensed facilitator since February of last year. So yay, it's my 1 year. I also am co-owner of a service center here in Oregon where I currently facilitate as well. Unlike this panel, I am very new to the psychedelic scene. My background is in physical therapy. I've been a physical therapist for the past little more than a decade now. And I really like the way Natai said it, that, I didn't find the mushrooms found me. I totally agree. Totally agree with that statement. And ever since they did, totally needed to be the path that I was going to be on. I recognized a huge shortcoming in the medical field and the healthcare industry, just with lack of the mind-body connection, a lack of a holistic approach, and knew there was something more to healing and a little bit something better, maybe even, or just a better adjunct to healing than we currently had. So kind of the way I found my path into facilitation and co-owning the center kind of fell in place, kind of all lined up the way it needed to line up, and been feels very super fortunate. And yeah, it's been a beautiful, beautiful ride. It's been a tumultuous ride too, kind of being pioneers, but it's also been amazing. I'm very appreciative. So thanks.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks to all the panelists. It's just so amazing to see you here, and also the great turnout we've had tonight. So let's get into it. So Henry only has a couple minutes. So before we just jump into the questions, Henry, just want to give you an opportunity, not necessarily with our panel questions, but just jump in with your thoughts, what your experience has been in the space. What are you seeing out there? Just want to make sure you have some time so people get to know you before we get into the general Q&A.
Sure. Thank you. I've had a really good experience working thus far. Some pros and cons to the above ground model. One of the pros, especially when it initially rolls out in Colorado, I would say definitely be proactive, because you're going to be the tip of the spear. And I guess the healing centers will have very large lists. So my first year or two, I was very, very busy. And then it peters off a little bit, and you have to kind of learn how to market on your own behalf. But it's nice to have places where you can go up and they're doing the marketing for you. I'm just saying this, gauging maybe some of the questions that you might be interested in. Another thing that I enjoy is having a medical director. Intertrek that we work at has a medical director that takes care of all the screening. When I was working outside of the model, I would get pretty tentative around several different SSRIs or things like that. So it's nice to have people in the space. The nice thing about a lot of Western medical practitioners and also body workers and somatic experiencers all entering the spaces, people are really sharing knowledge. And I've been really enjoying that. There's a lot to this, and no one person is going to understand how big of a rabbit hole the psychedelic experience is. So I would definitely advocate for fraternizing with your colleagues and building chat rooms and things of that nature, because it can be a very powerful resource, just the people that you know. Some of the things that I'm not a huge fan of compared to, at the church, it was it's your room. You kind of, within reason, do the things that feel intuitive. And in above ground, I feel like I'm almost tracking the laws in my head, and it kind of almost gives me like a stutter step in the things that I would have just do if I were moving from the heart in considering in consideration of the above ground floor mat. But overall, I feel very gratified with this choice of a life path. I would say you definitely want to keep your day job in the beginning, at least. And one little tip is, I would say, especially if you're doing this for a living, get some really good money management tools, because you'll be busy, and then nothing, and then super busy again. And the difference is, like, it's really quite refreshing when you have those pauses between clients, and it's something you definitely need. But it can be stressful if you're working all the time and then there is no business and then it gets busy again. But otherwise, it's nice to have the breaks. And I think that's about it. I have like 4 more minutes, so maybe if there's a question particularly for me, and then otherwise, enjoy your presentation. I have actually an integration session after this.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the comments, Henry. And a couple things resonated. One, just the power of community and collaboration, and that's why we're all here tonight. And I've, for myself, just had so many benefits from communities and just leaning in, just meeting people. And I find it healing for myself. And so it really just speaks to the power of community, and also just some of your business advice. And that really just dovetails right into my questions. And I think it's great advice. Don't quit your day job. And I think that's one of the things that'll come out of tonight's panel, hearing from people who are doing this as a living, what their their experience is, just from a straight financial perspective. And of course, the healing is the most important part, but also there are families to support and mouths to feed. So let's just get into the questions, because it really speaks to that. So I have a couple of questions here, and then Jason will. And then if you have questions in the audience, post them into the chat. We're collecting them, and then we'll address them, because they might be answered as we go. And we will get started. So asking the panelists right into it. How are you marketing your services? How are clients finding you? What's working and not working? Has it been easier or harder than you thought to find clients? So that's a lot of questions, but I'm kind of clustering these into themes. So this is all around client acquisition. So marketing, how you're finding them, where are you finding them, any surprises, challenges, any learnings that you have. Yes, Matt. You can just panelists, you can just come off mute and jump on in.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say that marketing and facilitation are not an overlapping skill set. And I am really awful at marketing. And if any other panelists have ideas they want to share, I am more than happy to hear them. But honestly, I am just very thankful that I got in so early and was able to establish a lot of relationships. Because if I didn't have those relationships now and wasn't getting both referrals and returning clients and past clients who are referring me to friends and family and things like that, I don't think I would be able to keep. This would not be sustainable for me. It also does help that I'm instructing. That does kind of fill in the gaps a little bit here and there. But Henry is absolutely right. You have to budget well, put money aside for a rainy day, because those rainy days definitely come, and winter does seem to be a little bit of a slow time. So I don't know, I can't speak for everybody here, but I would like it to be a little busier than it is. So I'm going to stop gabbing and let other people share, because maybe they actually have marketing ideas, because I
I'm
don't.
going to say one thing and then I'm going to hop off. And I think this is something that was organic, but I look back on it all and I'm very grateful for it. And I think that I'm going to offer this is just organically, I sort of became the go-to guy for actually companies and organizations, just through word of mouth. But I would say over the past few years, probably 60% of my clientele has come from one of 3 organizations that I'm attached to, and they've introduced me to other ones. And this is like working with the criminal justice space. So what I would say is identify a niche that you really feel passionate about, and then look to the organizations that treat that group of people or serve them in some way and go directly to them, whether that's the HR department or people that organize on their behalf, because you can go looking for client, or like one organization has hundreds of people. And then I would also say that when you put your banner up, you really want to be as authentic as possible. There's a lot of pressure to be like, I don't have any letters behind my name and this, and this. I really feel that I just said, this is who I am. This is how I interact with it. And that vulnerability, including my personal experience with substance abuse and that sort of thing, has also brought a certain type of person to me that really was resonant with that. So those are a few things. And if it weren't for those organizations, I wouldn't be able to be doing this for a living. So just offer that, and I'm going to go to my session and have a great talk tonight.
Thanks, Henry.
Yeah.
Ty?
Thank you, Henry.
So the way that I operate is I'm always intertwining the physical material, the emotional, mental. I apologize for that. In a minute, I'll try and unhook that. And the spiritual aspect. So for me, there's the possibility that you can find someone or align with, getting online and figuring out how to navigate the Facebook ads, the Instagram ads. But for me personally, and this has been reflected already, walking my talk, like living the authenticity, the integrity, and the passion of what I do, not being silent about my purpose. Like I share it with everybody. There can be this fear, this isn't fully legal yet, whatever. But when people ask me what I do for a living, I say I'm a legal psilocybin facilitator. And I say it all the time. And I have the kind of personality that lends to extroversion. So I'm going to go ahead and identify that, like, it's perhaps easier for me also based on my background. Like I've been taught to speak to what I do, speak kind of to promote myself, but not in an inauthentic way. When you're living your passion and your purpose, like the desire to share is there. And then, in honoring the consistent collaboration and showing up in spaces with your other facilitators, with your other everybody. Like Henry spoke to this, like if you in Oregon, we have to have a social equity plan, but there are so many nonprofits that don't even know what's available. So it's like, hey, you can go outreach to the people that you think might benefit from your services. And then show up to gatherings. That's actually how I met Jason. Like somebody had a community gathering at a winter solstice, and I drove up from Eugene and I made these incredible connections because ultimately we are helping each other. And there's ways in which we can look for the holes in the market, and we can start to be really honest about not reinventing the wheel, not just looking out for ourselves. But okay, you have a client that's not right for you, refer them to that other facilitator you think they're actually a good fit for. And you know what? They'll do the same for you. And just continue to show up, continue to, create healing spaces in your own communities, and you will develop a reputation. You will have people refer to you. I did work in the underground before I lived legally in Oregon, and I would say 75%, like almost everything was a referral. And I had to stay accountable. I had to stay in integrity, and I surrounded myself with people who helped me maintain that. And then my reputation began to precede me, and that was such a blessing. And yeah, I think that's all I got, and I've gone on for a while, so thank you.
No, that's great. I mean, you're speaking to integrity, authenticity, and the healing space. Those two must go hand in hand. People will sense when that's not happening. And so you're speaking to the fact that that's what's helping you and your reputation and your business grow. So I think that's great advice. Any other panelists want to chime? Yes, Christine Marie.
Yeah, so something that I did when I first was starting my energy healing practice was and this goes the same, for those that are wanting to, of course, increase their psychedelic practice in facilitation, is you can just start to host events or meetups. And that is maybe even just like an info session of like, okay, this is psilocybin, therapy, or this is about plant medicine, or this is, whatever it is that you want to teach about or bring through an experiential with, like those maybe in your community. And that's just an easy way for people to meet you, one, and two, to start to build trust and rapport with you, and to see if it's already an aligned fit just in a maybe an hour, 2 hour workshop. And then they might be, oh, okay, well, I feel aligned with you, and I feel like there's already some trust built. Maybe we could go into like a deeper session, or maybe we can, explore microdosing or something like that. And I say that because obviously with this work, it is very vulnerable for people. And I believe especially survivors of trauma, which most of us are, have this really delicate dance of wanting to be supported and also not having that trust bone developed within them. And so that's one way to develop trust and rapport before you go into something so much deeper with a potential client. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And what you're speaking to, or some of what you're speaking to, is authority and thought leadership. And so hosting events is absolutely doing that. And then also people get a chance to, see what your personality is. So some people will click with it, some people will not. But doing group events is a way to, just like we're doing here, we're getting the word out about who we are, what we do, and especially in a landscape that, and maybe some of the other panelists could touch on this, where paid advertising is very, very challenging, if not impossible. So if you don't have paid advertising, well, then you must put other advertising marketing practices into place. And so events is a great way to do that. Other panelists, Jessica, I see you're off mute, or just feel free to jump in. Anything around client acquisition, marketing?
I feel like get business cards and carry your cards everywhere, because you'd be surprised like the conversations that you will have and the people that will ask you for that too. And, kind of in the vein of that community feel like, yeah, and don't be afraid to say what you are and what you're doing. The more this is destigmatized, the more comfortable everyone's going to be to seek out these services. It's amazing how many people are kind of hungry for this conversation, but afraid to initiate. So you being the initiator, being loud and vocal, and also, carrying your card with you wherever you go.
Agreed. Business cards still work. How many times are you at a conference and someone says, oh, I don't have cards anymore, I forgot my cards? Business cards still work. Totally agree with that. Okay. Any other thoughts on client acquisition? If not, we'll move on to the next question.
I'd love to share a quick thoughts on that of what we've been hearing through the Psilocybin Facilitators Association and through the centers of really having a uniqueness of understanding of what makes you unique versus other folks can really help. And that's helped, I think, grow the program in Oregon, is service centers that really like, hey, well, they might work in microdosing, or one might work for a certain population, that really having that really separates individuals out. And part of the collaboration, something we're coming up on another training that's been part of an ongoing series that PATA has for developing businesses for psychedelic professionals. Greg's going to be doing a training later on this month or in a few weeks on marketing specifically for psychedelic professionals. So for facilitators or folks wanting to be in the industry. We'll have that up as a meetup training as another collaborative event. And it will also be posted on our YouTube channel. The rest of our series on the business professions of, how to get insurance or accounting or legal, or how to set up a business. We have a whole training series available on that for free, and I'll link that into the chat here in a second. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And yeah, Matt mentioned specialization, and so did Henry. And I think that's so important. I mean, I've had an agency for quite a few years, but really when I started focusing solely in this space, first of all, it's more fun. It's something that speaks to my passion, and that will come through in your authenticity and when you're doing events, when you're handing out a business card. And so there, and I'll be talking about that in my training in a couple of weeks, but there are so many ways to do that, whether you're focusing in on a special type of population or retreats like the Thai, or a something that you've struggled with, trauma, depression, etc. And that's just going to help resonate with the audience that that is going to resonate with you because you have that connection. So
Can I
okay,
just
yeah, go on.
Can I just say one thing about that really quickly? I do really appreciate people do have specialties, and a lot of service centers and things are really looking for that. And like I said, I have a end of life doula certification, and I had a partner who became terminally ill and passed away, and those sorts of things. And I actually have worked with quite a few clients with end of life issues, and I'm more than happy to do that. But at the same time, I have a slight aversion to specialties just because I do also have a broad range of interests. I was brought up in a very, my father and brother were both priests. Religion was a everyday part of my life growing up. And I'm an animist now, actually became one quite young, but spirituality is still very important. Like nature connectivity. I used to work with the endangered species product or projects, and I'm not going to go on about it, but I do have a variety of interests and I really enjoy working with a variety of people. So there's a part of me that's kind of adverse to that because I don't want to be pigeonholed and solely be working with one type of or one group of people that's looking for one set with one set of circumstances. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think there are two schools of thought, and then there's also the middle of the road, which is kind of what you're speaking to. So it's really finding what works for you. I will just say that, in a lot of industries, I've heard this, people get sort of scared about focusing in on a niche, saying, wait, I don't want to be pigeonholed. And I totally get that. At the same time, it really does, it can really, reinforce your authority in that space. So I'm not pushing back at all what you're saying, Matt. It's still, navigating and finding what works for you. And yeah, it's a balance, and it also doesn't have to be just one thing. I mean, it can be you help people who struggle with depression, and you also do retreats. So it's not all black and white. So it is kind of a spectrum. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, so next question I have here is about accessibility. And again, this is kind of the theme, but I'll just throw out some questions around that. What are you seeing in terms of clients' ability to afford your services? To what extent are you seeing resistance to the prices that you're charging or that your service center is charging? How do you deal with that? It's kind of that whole subject of accessibility and helping people get the healing that they need, balancing that with what needs to be exchanged, the energy exchange to make that happen. So feel free to jump in. And also audience, anyone who joined late, we are asking questions to the panelists, but if you have questions, just post them into the chat. We are collecting them, and then we will get to those questions at the end. Yeah, Natai.
So accessibility at the current price point in Oregon is definitely keeping some people out. The interesting thing is Oregon is also a very white state. So what we're looking at is we all have these social equity plans that are written, to me, it almost feels like to some degree lip service. And I'm not sure they're actually even getting in the hands of the people out of state. Actually, organizations like this are helpful to this very thing. I personally have aligned with organizations that have social equity plans that include facilitators working for lowered rates. I personally am always if I'm booking retreats and stuff like that, I'm always working with clients because my bottom line is if paying for something that you are, you really desire, that you feel like is an important part of your healing journey, is going to dysregulate your nervous system before and after this journey, it's not worth it. So let's figure out a plan. And the way that I often operate with money and in general is like, in this line, I'm viewing this as my purpose. I'm viewing this as my calling, and I need to be provided for enough to survive and do the work that I feel privileged and blessed to do. And the exact amount of what that looks like is shifting for me. It's like, how do I meet myself and how do I meet others in a way where I can consistently show up? And where that doesn't align is if you get so like dysregulated that you want to say yes to someone just to get money in your bank. That should be a no. And that's, again, an integrity issue. So again, it kind of all circles back to the same holistic vein for me, which is like, how do you continuously find the other people that you can work with that are actually getting the accessibility, social equity plans out to and in the hands of the people that need them? And then how do you align with them? Get yourself on their roster, get yourself on their channel. And in a very real way, though, it changes the demographic. In my retreats, I largely see people with disposable income that are between the ages of 50 and 75. So we're looking at people retired. We're looking at people with disposable income. We're looking at people that have a deep desire to do this work legally, which, is more, and I think in most people's minds, more safely. So you're going to look at a different clientele just by the nature of accessibility, just by the nature of cost point, who, whatever marketing is being, reaching people out of state. And that's also something to orient yourself to, right? As a facilitator, I actually really enjoy working with people who this might be their first psychedelic experience. I love meeting people at that edge, but that may not be for all of you, right? So take that into account as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Natai. Yeah, that's
Just
really
want to
good
share.
perspective on how you're thinking about this. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, who was up?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that several months ago, I spoke on a panel at another PATA at a conference, and there was a reporter from Oregon Public Broadcasting there, and they did a write-up that seemed to be mostly just from what some of the speakers were saying at this conference. And right at the end, they had a little blurb because the subject of equity plans came up, and I just kind of used mine as an example. And the reporter did not use full context, and it just made it sound like, oh, Matt Whistler is willing to do free sessions for people who meet this criteria. So I got bombarded with a lot of people who had high needs and low accessibility. I thought it was actually really fantastic because I was able to provide some services to some people. I was able to refer people out, sent some people to some nonprofits that are giving grants for people to access these services. But at the same time, what that really told me was that there is really a lack of awareness out there about how facilitators themselves are willing to operate on sliding scales. On occasion, they are willing to do free sessions. It got to a point where I did have to start saying no. And it wasn't like I just didn't get back to people. I did make sure I referred them to other people and those sorts of things. But we do all need to eat as well. And just on that, I'm going to also just point out there that I've also gotten a little bit of blowback about, how can facilitators charge this much money for a session and those sorts of things. And I do think this medicine, this healing modality should be accessible to everybody who wants it and can benefit from it. But at the same time, and do not get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm a shaman in any way, shape, or form, but in traditional cultures, yeah, shamans don't charge anything, but they are also supported by their community. And unfortunately, in this capitalist society, money is how we support each other as a community. So it's just a reality of life that's something that we have to deal with. Um, Thank you. I'm going to let other people talk for a bit.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, I really love what both of you shared, and like you said, the reality is that we do need to eat. And my philosophy is that if I need to show up at my best, mind, body, spirit, to be in service and support for those that are going on this journey and this healing journey, then I need to make sure that I have enough money to pay myself, to go to the gym, to eat good food, to have a roof over my head, you know? And so it is this, I feel like this polarization I've been seeing in the community about how much you should charge, how much you shouldn't charge. And at the end of the day, I think is as long as you're in integrity, as long as you are really aligned with what you feel that your value is and that you are providing that value, then I think it's really ultimately up to you with how much you want to charge. And it's okay that I lost my train of thought. Oh, it's okay that you can explore and experiment. Like that's what I did at first. I explored with a lower, and then I was like, oh, that didn't feel good. I was burning out, and so I explored with a higher, and then I'm kind of like in this in between. And honestly, with those that do have the financial stability and resources, I might charge more, and it's not because I am. I might charge my base rate is what I mean. So then that when I have somebody that needs maybe a pro bono or a free session, that like essentially that money that I got from the higher paying client at my base rate, like I feel like I got, I'm covered for that time and energy, because you have to remember you might be with someone for an 8-hour session, a couple of hours of prep, a couple of hours of integration, a couple of hours of paperwork and all that. Like it's a lot of work. And I think it's really valid to want to feel like, you can get paid an equitable amount to live the lifestyle that you need in order to show up for your clients in the best possible way.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to speak about accessibility or how you're handling pricing, sliding scale, how you communicate to your clients or potential clients about pricing? So Christine Marie shared, for example, all the time that goes into it. It's beyond, the journey session itself is 6 to 8 hours, but there's additional time, prep, integration, as you said, paperwork, and it's a lot of time.
Yeah, I think it works out to being about 12 to 16 hours per client in my experience. But I think we should back up, and because I see two models here in Oregon. Some of the service centers actually employ facilitators, and in that case, you don't have much choice. They're going to pay you what they pay you, and they're going to charge a client what they pay. Of course, they all have social equity plans. I find that I like the flexibility of being an independent contractor, working at different service centers, and setting my own fee. I know the rates are high, and accessibility it relates to finance is the biggest issue facing Oregon, I think. But everyone's saying that you have to make a living, put a roof on your head, go to the gym, etc. The range I hear from what facilitators charge in Oregon currently are between $600 and $5,000. I've never charged my full rate of $1,600. And most commonly it's $1,200, but I've done sessions for free for $500, pretty much whatever. I don't really decide what I'm going to charge until the client asks me. But I have that luxury because I'm not working this full time. I don't need this to pay my mortgage or whatever. So I want to make my fees as low as possible to allow people to participate if they're interested. I think it was Matt said, I believe in the right to try as well. I think pretty much everybody that passes the screening criteria that the OHA and probably the Colorado system lay out is entitled to a session, and we should really work to try to provide that as best possible. I would caution against getting into groups. That's a way to make things, if you're just getting started and haven't done any work underground with groups, because it gets really tough and it's a lot of work. And you learn a lot in your first dozen or two sessions. Uh, and people have been burned by trying to put together groups that maybe don't quite mesh well. Uh, Thinking of a recent case here in Oregon, but it just take it slow. Don't rush in there. Don't try to. You're going to be in this for the long haul. Start off slow because there's a lot to learn. Uh, Everyone that does underground work that moves into regulated work says it's a completely different population that come from out of state, especially. I mean, we've all had folks come from out of country, in fact. Uh, it's just it's a hard job and there's a lot to learn. And the best way of increasing your profile is just to do a good job with each client and give it your all. Um, I'll shut up.
That's great advice, especially for what resonated with me, the idea of retreats. Retreats are wonderful and magical. And on the business side, it might be easy to say, well, that's a good way to essentially leverage my time and generate more money. And maybe Nitai has some, she's going like this. So I think that's amazing advice. And maybe you want to chime in on that, Nitai, on the topic of retreats and how that relates to the business side of.
Yeah, I want to chime in on all of it because group work is really, really challenging. And I actually started off doing group work 4 years ago and got thrown into the deep end. And I'm very, very lucky that I have navigated that and continued to push my edges of learning because it's a whole different thing. And it requires so much work. By the way, like I don't even think about my breakdown for my hourly because doing retreats for me is the way that I passionately believe this work should be done. And I don't want to use the should word, but I put in minimum probably 3 90-minute preparation sessions, 2 group, one individual. And then on top of that, there's discovery calls with clients to vet them. And then there's a 12-hour days essentially. And then I have 3 90 minutes on the back end. So when you actually break down my hourly, I can't even think about it. I'm doing it because this is the life I want to live. It's a beautiful thing and it's a tricky thing. And it's something that requires a ton of work and a ton of thought. So that's the last I'll say on that.
Yeah, no, that's amazing advice because we're talking about the financial side, but also what, especially for newer people, like you said, Michael, definitely get. I'm not a practitioner, but what I'm hearing you say is don't jump into this. Definitely don't jump into this in a group way or a retreats way, thinking, hey, that's faster path to the finances that you want, or that it's easier to do that because you're leveraging your time. Because based on what Natai said, that is not necessarily the case, but you're doing it, Natai, as we all are doing this work because we're passionate about it. And ideally, we can make the financial side work so that we can, make a living and provide for ourselves. So, well said. Any other thoughts from the panelists on accessibility, pricing, how you're communicating that, handling that? Okay. So my last question before we turn it over to Jason for some of his repeat clients. To what extent are you seeing return clients? How often do they return? Based on that, and this kind of ties to just financial compensation for yourself. Are you supplementing your psilocybin healing services with other types of services and modalities that are going to round out the income that you're generating? So, but kind of starting with that question of repeat clients. Yes, Jessica.
So the hope is you don't have repeat clients.
Right.
Would think. So yeah, generally you are trying to, help people in that one session. And a lot of times that is successful, especially I feel like with proper preparation and integration. integration is 1000% key to that, I feel like. And so then knowing your referral sources too, to further those people's integration, you know, kind of not leaving your clients high and dry after your one, maybe two integration sessions afterwards, I think is very important. To not have repeat clients, but in a good way. And so generally, I've had people come back twice, never more than that. And they get what they need kind of off that second session, especially. So yes, that was that. And then I'm so sorry, what was the other?
Oh, if you are supplementing your psilocybin services with other
Oh, I
services.
still do physical therapy work. Yes.
Okay.
And so,
Right.
yeah, for sure. I couldn't make a living off of it. But in a way, I'm kind of good with the balance, because I still love my PT, but I get such passion and fulfillment out of this side of things. But it's kind of nice to have that little bit of a break. I think, like Henry was saying, in between. So you just, because it is a lot. It's a lot of energy that you're putting out for people, and receiving too. And so it's nice to kind of get a little bit of separation at times, just to balance and to replenish.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in? Yes, Matt.
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of push back a tiny bit on what Jessica had to say, in that I actually do get quite a few repeat clients. They're not immediate, but oftentimes they are not necessarily coming back with the same set of intentions, but rather building on the work that they've already done. And I also get some clients where, you know, they saw wonderful benefits and maybe a year's gone by and that's starting to slip a little bit. And so it's a little bit of a refresher. And I actually had a service center say, I don't know, maybe it's different for everybody, but one of the ones that I facilitate most often, they actually said, you know, you get by far the most returning clients out of any of our facilitators. And at first I thought what Jessica just said, and I was like, oh no, I must not be doing them a good service. And they actually said, no, I think it's the contrary. I think it actually really speaks to the relationships you form with these people. And I think that is really key to any facilitation practice, is just really forming that bond with the client and establishing that trust and acting with integrity, because that will come across to people in sessions. Yeah, and I honestly, you know, when a client, I've had many clients ask me, like, how long should I wait before my next session? And my only real response to that is, you know, wait until you feel like you've integrated everything that you can from your first session and that you're applying that in your life. And then maybe you're trying to build on that. And I never tell a client they should come back or when they should come back. I don't actually answer that question with a time period. But I am absolutely open to and happy when people reach out and say, hey, I want to come back for another session. Yeah.
Ty.
I'm going to bounce off Matt and say that, you know, if you're a facilitator doing this work yourself, have you ever just done one journey and never done another one or done two? So for me, it's really about assessing if someone is doing the integration work and being very, very honest with yourselves and them about it. This past year in 2024, I have what I consider to be the privilege of a lifetime, which I had someone commit to working with me a year. They did 3 retreats and worked with me weekly for a year. And it was insane what happened. Like lifetime of CPTSD, all this stuff. And the fact that this person chose to trust me is because I also get a lot of feedback like Matt. Like people are like, there's like a trust that develops. And I also put in extra work. I don't do just one. To me, one preparation, one integration is bare minimum, and you don't have rapport. Like I'm like a minimum 2 to 3 preparation session, 2 to 3 integration. And that's how I operate. And because of that, it's like I attract clients that are committed to that kind of work, which is not going to be everybody.
Do you see a difference there from psychonauts coming into this versus, you know, the normies? And some people say that we're the normies, but you know what I mean, the non-psychonauts. Because I'm a psychonaut. I mean, my healing journey started 3 years ago, and I can tell you I'm a great client. I've been a repeat client whew, versus say a non-psychonaut who's, they learned about psychedelic healing from wherever, and they're coming in and they have had an amazing experience, but they might have really tapped into financial resources to do it. They have had great results, but they're not necessarily going to, commit to a year. As wonderful it is as it is to have a client like that, that's really digging in. So you want to comment on that, just kind of how that plays out based on the type of client coming in? Christine,
One thing that I often share and have had a personal experience with in my psychedelic journey is I really, really believe that part of the beauty of doing any sort of psychedelic work, especially with something that comes from the ground, the earth, our mother, is that there's an opportunity to build a relationship with psilocybin. And that is something that has been, even just the relationship with the medicine itself, has been such an extremely healing impact on my own life and many clients that I've served. And so sometimes people also have this desire to continue to build on that relationship and to gain the healings and the teachings from the medicine. And we can't really quite say, like, there's not one size that fits all, because our desires, our connections to certain plants or medicines might feel different. So I just want to put that and plant a seed there of I do believe that there's an opportunity to build a relationship with this medicine, and sometimes people will, and it's not to say that that should override the integration work. It should just be a merging of both. And so, yeah, anyways, I'll end there.
thank you.
It's gonna be a good time. There's a question that came in. This would be good, kind of piggyback off of that. Of just, how has the year looked for y'all? With, there was the excitement and the buzz, and it's like, yay! And now we're a year into it, and the dynamic is changing, and you have Colorado coming up. That besides your personal, experiences or your personal clientele list, how has it, evolved over the year as far as, just continuing getting clients, or what you've heard, now versus, when everybody was wanting information?
Just speak personally really quickly. For me, it's been actually kind of fantastic because I do instruct at a certification program that's running in Colorado. So I'm getting to know and forming relationships with a lot of people who are working in or looking to work in this space in Colorado, have some offers at healing centers that are coming up to come out and do some work with them, and other training programs that are starting up. So on a personal level, that aspect has been fantastic. I will just say, like it's been alluded to a few times, it is, especially right now in the middle of winter, it's slowed down a little bit client wise. So we'll have to see how that plays out. They're not actually seeing clients, at least in the legal framework in Colorado yet. So we don't quite have that like client competition at this point. So it'll be interesting to see if that does have an impact in that regard.
Do you think it slowed down in the winter because of people traveling in and they're not?
A lot of people come from out of state, and I
Right,
think
exactly.
people want to travel, and they want to, it's part of like a mini vacation kind of,
Yeah,
and they don't want to come out when it's cold and raining and
right.
gray all the
Yeah,
time. I
makes
think
sense.
that's a big part of it. Yeah.
I also think because it was an election year, that has a lot to do with people's fear around finances and stability and security. So I actually feel like that has a big, big impact too.
Okay. You're on mute.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that. It's
Yeah.
actually pretty funny. I am here the night before a 5-day retreat in Ashland, and we have 3 feet of snow, and flights are getting delayed.
Oh,
And we have a full retreat, and we're pivoting. Boy, we are pivoting fast. So yes, it's typically slow in the winter because Oregon is cold and rainy. But I've aligned myself with a marketing genius actually, and that's something that I've done to navigate the uncertainty. But I also am very well aware that, I do supplemental coaching, and, it's some of it's psychedelic related and some of it's not. And so I try to get weekly clients that keep me afloat. But to be honest with you, the way that my life has directed me, I have, I think, a higher level of uncertainty, the ability to be with a higher level of uncertainty than most. And it's actually a pretty enormous amount of spiritual trust I have that this is the path I'm supposed to walk. And sometimes it's wild. I'm booked out the farthest I've ever been with retreats. And there's still a month or two in there with nothing. And I'm just trusting. So that's not really something you can teach. I would say having your little paws in different pots is probably lovely, but if it can all revolve around what feeds your soul, then it's helpful. I know that's a little on the woo side, but yeah.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Okay, this has been amazing so far. I'm going to turn it over to Jason, so you can ask some questions, and then attendees, just place your questions in the chat. We're collecting them, and then hopefully we will have time and we can answer some of those as well. So take it away, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. And if we're not able to get to your questions, we'll have our emails in there, and some of these might be better asked or answered individually than on the chat, particularly how this is geared around the regulated formats and not going into general information of how would one handle a session, or what's happening outside of OPS. I'll put my email will be in the chat. If you would like to, I'd be happy to answer more questions in detail. Kind of piggybacking off of what everybody's saying, in the industry, overall, OPS has seen a decrease, over the year, but we use the phrase a lot of we're building the plane as we're taking off. And it's really, really dynamic. And so it is really tough, not anybody that's interested in becoming a facilitator. It's a very dynamic environment. We have folks that are doing really well, and there's folks that have said they haven't had a single client in a year. So the reality is that there really is a broad range. So one of the goals of this is really to empower everybody to think about what it is you're going to be doing, and that this isn't just an automatic, hey, I'm going to have this great successful business. There's a lot of work and a lot of effort that gets put into it for that. So the question I have to start off, the given Oregon Psilocybin Services is an adult supported use program, and Colorado will be slightly different. How do you navigate assisting clients looking to use, the program or programs for, mental health needs?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure, thank you. So there's a mix of folks coming into the programs. Some are specifically looking for mental health, looking to address mental health, and they could be using other folks on their team, including therapists. So are you seeing challenges with folks coming in that are specifically addressing mental health when some of the limitations that you have on, as a facilitator in providing, that this is, supposed to be, you're not directing people and where to go. So if you have any experiences or thoughts on, people coming in, wanting to address mental health needs and any limitations that you guys have or have seen with actually helping those in session, so kind of like expectations and realities.
I'll just say a significant portion of clients are coming because they have things like treatment-resistant depression and other issues like that. It's also, I personally, if I have a client who comes in and they have a pretty in-depth history of trauma, if they don't have any experience in therapy, kind of trying to address that in any way, therapy is probably the first step they need. If you get them in a session, that trauma comes up and they've never really confronted it in earnest before, fight, flight, freeze is going to kick in. And that's when you're just going to have real big challenges, perhaps adverse reactions, things like that. So really there's using that level of professional judgment. Then if I have clients who are seeing therapists, I actually pretty regularly incorporate their therapists into the process. So their therapists will sit in on mostly integration aspects. And I actually find that works really well because the therapist has an established relationship. They know things about the client from that long-term relationship that I may not know, but I've also gone through this process with the client and I've shared that session space with them. So I'll also have insights that the therapist doesn't have. And so I find that tag team kind of works really well. There's only one exclusionary factor related to that here in Oregon, and that's a diagnosis of active psychosis. So people can come with a whole range of mental health concerns or issues. And it really is up to us to use our discretion as to how we address those yellow flags, as I'll often call them. So I'll leave it to somebody else.
Yes,
Yeah, Jason, I had a point there. One of the significant differences between Oregon and Colorado is that in Colorado we have the distinct difference for a clinical facilitator license. And that means a licensed therapist can become a facilitator and practice therapy during the session, as opposed to being non-directive as a more general facilitator. So that's a big change that were happening in Colorado as opposed to what was been practiced in Oregon. So, well, I agree with what Matt said. The back and forth with a therapist and facilitator is wonderful because you can definitely get a lot of input from what the client shares from their work with the therapist and how that can contribute.
I think it's okay for potential facilitators to say no if they don't feel they're up to the client's mental health burden. And I know acute psychosis is a red flag, but boy, you got to have some experience dealing with bipolar folks and borderline personalities, personal or family history of schizophrenia. I just don't feel like I have the skill set to really to facilitate those people very well. I usually send them to someone else, typically a therapist. For folks that are coming out of state, I always make sure they have local support, local mental health support. And if they don't have it, I really more or less require them to have that because my integration usually ends a month or 6 weeks, sometimes 2 months after the session, and the needs go on. So yeah, it's okay to say no. I've said no to a handful of clients. I just didn't feel like I could do the job as well as another person.
Great, thank you, Michael. Nitai?
Yeah, I actually regularly consult with Dr. Mike regarding, SSRIs. I think, and everything that Matt said, I think is super valid. I'm a fan of the not yet, and I have a very clear, practical application plan. If someone, and I've gotten really good at sussing out when someone's half answering or not answering questions. And I do 45-minute discovery calls. I really dig with people before I take them on as a client. And a lot of what I'm looking for is what are your supports? What is your emotional reactivity to the trauma you're discussing? What regulation tools are already in place? What is your medical history overall and your current medication history? And there's just so many factors at play. There's no one answer. You have to take the individual as they're placed in their life and as they're placed in the present iteration of a history. And you have to look at where they're going back to. And all of it, to me, it's like I take on the responsibility, and I'm not to be dramatic, but I have someone's life in my hands. And if I can work with their team, their therapist, their psychiatrist, that's more the better. But I've done 3-month preparations with people who are not yet. I had one client take off for 3 months, who kept sending me emails. I said, you don't have enough support networks. And he actually created a group. He had a group created for male adult survivors of child abuse. This is the kind of commitment that if people want to do this work, they are capable of. And this is also the kind of work that will have them continuing to transform their trauma after a journey.
Yeah, agree with everyone's statements here. And also, I think number one, it's very important to know your network and to establish that community and get that community of referrals and specialists too in your area who you can collaborate with. Yeah, because I'd say 99% of clients that come through here are coming through for a mental health condition. And so, yeah, that's totally needed. And again, that integration is super important. And if you're going to only have 1 to 2 integration sessions, maybe possibly up to a month with this person, and then they're kind of falling off, then, that's something that needs to be addressed. And so there are like local community integration support networks as well. And so I would recommend really searching for those and finding those to give as resources.
Thank you. That's great. And a good thing I think to recognize is, I mean, you guys are among some of the best, that are out there. Standard though across facilitators, what Oregon Psilocybin Services puts out. There's been some questions around integration and preparation. Preparation and integration on the base level that facilitators need to do is administrative preparation, and integration is essentially just to check in if you are there, and then you're getting into good and great, and that's what a lot of these facilitators are talking about. And that's some of the variable, is that the integration is really what are facilitators doing extra beyond what is just the requirement. Requirement is a very base level. Best practices, is higher. So it's really challenging. And like one of the questions was about, Jungian, psychoanalysis in integration. Those could be great, but it's outside of the context of what the facilitators are and what the requirements are. There is no requirement for, for facilitators to do any integration in the context that we are thinking. Those are extra resources, or those are, facilitators going, above and beyond. And unfortunately, we got a lot of great questions that are about kind of outside of what the scope of this is, and we do have some other trainings available, around this. We could. I mean, many of these questions we could spend a whole training on. So to bring it back to the facilitators and in the training, Greg, first, did you record the video training that CPS, Colorado Psychedelic Society, did around the training facilities there in
We did, yes. Yes, we did. So basically, we invited the 10 schools that are certified to provide those facilitation licenses or facilitator licenses, and 7 showed up, and we had a great turnout like tonight. And it basically allowed people that are interested in going to this work to learn from those schools. So yeah, we do have that, and we can make that available.
Great. And maybe you could link that in the chat if people want to follow up with that.
Yes.
And on and on the training programs. And this is very insightful, because this is something that we could be offering more trainings on in the future. We really want to be adaptive to what everybody else, has on here. And if you do have specific questions and we're not able to answer any of them, feel free to reach out to the, to the panelists or myself. Happy to talk about more into details, particularly around therapeutic practices and approaches. Another question around, your training. What do you think your training program, did not prepare you for when becoming a licensed facilitator?
Well, I will share that I took a training with Intertrek. I was part of the first cohort that graduated, and I was actually very grateful that I had previous training in the energetics of what it actually means to be in a psychedelic state, an altered state, because I think what we did learn was a lot of, harm reduction skills, how to hold space, motivational interviewing, all of that. But what was really missing that I found was a really big gap for all my my co-students, if you will, was not knowing really the energetics about what happens when a psychic space opens during a psychedelic experience. And so I feel like part of my mission is to help bridge the gap between those worlds and to provide more education on that. And I really, really recommend, if you want to become a facilitator, to just start to educate yourself or find a mentor or guide that can really provide some of that knowledge and information. Again, even just the basic minimum of energy hygiene, energy boundaries, what to sense when a container like that is open, how to protect the space, all of that is, I find, really, really important. And so, yeah, that is what I encourage y'all to maybe investigate further.
Yeah, any other thoughts on just the training programs in general of something that you thought that you wish you would have learned or had, maybe needed to look into a little bit more that was outside of what was being provided?
One
Well,
thing was, oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry. The, uh, the what the training programs teach is pretty well regulated by the OHA and their rules, and because of the time constraints that it takes to do that, I'm not sure there is time for much else, and I think that the uh, guidelines for training programs are relatively complete. I do see that some of the programs to minimize the cost are now offering retreat-free options to kind of reduce cost and maybe streamline it a bit. But boy, I think you pay a price if you don't do the retreats, because that's where the real bonding happens and much more in-depth work than just a bunch of Zoom calls, which seems to be the way to go. I just think getting together with your cohort for 2 or 3, 4 weekends during the 3 to 6 months that you're involved in training is just so important. I can't really articulate why, but given the choice, I'd try to do as many of those retreats as you can. For me, it helped a lot with learning some of the traditional and indigenous practices. And things that I didn't feel were covered well, I've really just sought out on my own to round out, but I can't really articulate what it is, because a situation will come up. Like, I'm not even sure what Christine Marie's talking about with energetics, so I better read up on that. Maybe it's just another way of phrasing it, but it's just an example. So I mean, I kind of address each gap by backfilling it in as I find my knowledge not there for that particular topic. I apologize for the rambling answer, but I don't. Maybe Christine Marie has something better to say on that topic than I. I cut her off.
No, I was finished. So thank you, Michael.
Any other thoughts on the training programs that you'd like to share?
I feel like there is an integration period needed to integrate the knowledge into practical application. And the place, besides, you can take all this stuff in, but understanding how to apply all the knowledge you've gotten, I really would love to see less expensive practicum. I'd love to see people coming on and more of like almost an old world craft, like assisting. Dr. Mike and I actually trained at the same place. And when I got licensed and started doing retreats, I started offering free practicum to my former training program. I would allow someone to come on as a assistant and walk with me through as much of it as they wanted for free, because you don't know how your nervous system is going to react. You don't develop your intuition until you're putting it into practice actively. And to hold people with higher levels of trauma, like, this is a responsibility. And I really would like us to see us as an industry hold ourselves accountable for what that means in more practical ways that are also accessible for students.
Also, all training programs are not the same. And so, you know, as much as it is regulated, know that there are varied differences, and you should really do your research and due diligence and ask other people who have been through the programs, just to make sure that, you know, you're getting the best education possible. But
I'm just going to say, it feels to me like one of the shortcomings, and there is space for this a little bit in practicums, but just I've seen a lot of facilitators coming into this space, and they don't have a very extensive history themselves in working with these medicines. And so I think just personal journeying and building that relationship with psilocybin is really integral to this practice. So, you know, maybe you've sat in one or two journeys and had an amazing breakthrough and a fantastic experience, and you're excited to share that with other people. That's great, but build that relationship and get some experience navigating that space and being able to empathize and understand the range and variety of experiences that your clients can have. I think that's really important, and I think it's something that's perhaps a little bit overlooked and neglected in training programs.
I couldn't agree more with what Matt shared. I think it's absolutely vital to develop your own relationship with the medicine yourself, and to be able to really, you know, it's that quote that you can't really meet other people as deeply as you've met yourself. And that is what doing this work requires in my eyes.
Yeah, there was a surprising number of facilitators that were interested or became facilitators with zero experience prior to that. And, you know, common practice, particularly with facilitators, is a huge red flag to not understand. So that is something, you know, definitely say should be a requirement, but is not to have that prior experience. But how can you help someone if you don't understand the process that, you know, that it's going for? So there's a bunch of great questions, and I think some of them will be more directed either at the information that Greg provided on the training programs, and include, you know, reach out to what those are. The next training that we have, we'll be talking more about from Sean McAllister and McAllister Law. He was one of the creators of the Health Act there in Colorado. We'll be talking about the specifics of licensure, because there's some questions about, you know, being a physician, nurse practitioner, the clinical licensure, and then working at centers if they have a medical director, and courses all vary depending on where they're taking from. Some are bare minimum, some are going to be offering, you know, 40 hours of additional training on there, so those could really be, you know, directed towards where you're at. As far as the you know, the mentorship, there's something that we're hoping to develop with the Psilocybin Facilitators Association. Christine Marie also offered that, and we'll see if we can't make that you know, something more possible. If any of the, you know, panelists, you know, want to offer that, you know, please feel free to in your, you know, in the chats to share that. There are some other questions around therapy and how that was being used. Those are great questions. I think that would be a whole nother context that we could get into that rabbit hole. This is something that we have extensive knowledge at the Psilocybin Assisted Therapy Association with. So if you'd like to learn more about that, please you know, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can share what some of the differences are for folks, you know, the best practices of folks who are looking for therapy versus looking for an experience. Are there any final words from the panelists? I mean, we've been going at this for a while, and it seems like we could keep going. Is there anything that you guys would just like to share as like a parting thoughts of like 2 minutes of like, hey, this is what I really wish I knew, or this is what I wish everybody knew before going into?
I'd say just make sure you're actually passionate about doing this work and you're really feeling called to it, because it won't always feed your needs in, the monetary sense, for sure. So it has to really come from a place of passion and respect for this medicine.
I just want to piggyback on what Jessica just said and just say I do feel very blessed that I get to do this work. And I still have moments and sessions with clients when I'm just blown away that I'm sharing that space with somebody. So if you are passionate about it and you have some relevant background and experience, and this is something you do want to pursue, absolutely, I encourage that. Just make sure you are doing it for the right reasons. And yeah, financial gain is, you're not going to really necessarily find that here. So that's not the right motivation for this work.
Yeah, I love what like all the panelists have said. It's so, for me, it's been, once you develop this ongoing relationship with the medicine, you'll actually start getting instructions on how to do this work from the medicine directly. And I've heard many times, you must know what you ask of them. You must know what you ask from them for them, and don't use us. This is an active allyship and relationship. And so really being in deep reverence and respect for what you get to do. For me, it feels like the privilege of a lifetime, and also honoring that you can't do it alone. Like, it's so important to have community. It's so important to have people whose strengths you can go to that's not your strength, right? Like, okay, I have an entire team of holistic practitioners that do my retreats that are also facilitator trained. And when my business grows, you better believe I'm going to hand them clients, because I have a death doula. I have, you know what I mean? I have all these people that do workshops at my retreats. And it's a matter of continuing to just build within your community, build within your own relationship with the medicine, and then ultimately build within your own self-trust that you keep pushing the edges of your own ethics in a good way, in a positive way. Like, keep doing the work better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard work. There's a lot of delays. There's a lot of frustrations. There's some false hopes about the amount of money you're going to make. But 90% of the time, I still say that I'm having the time of my life and I'm enjoying this as much as anything. 10% of the time, I'm thinking, when's my license going to expire so I can just stop this? But that's a rare day. But they do come up. Most of the time, it's the best thing I've ever done.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for participating and for offering your time. We have several folks with clinical degrees, in addition to being facilitators, Dr. Mike, Jessica is PT, and Christine Marie is a nurse. So, if you have more questions, specifically for them, their emails are provided. You can also email Pata or Greg, and we can help facilitate answering any of those questions. I wish we had more time to go into more details, and perhaps we'll do this again, either on more specific topics or something else based on feedback. So really an honor to be here with everybody. Greg, an honor to be collaborating with Colorado Psychedelic Society, and thank you all for being leaders out there, and thank you all the panelists for being brave and the pioneers and sharing your experiences to enlighten the next generation of facilitators. So thank you all.